I feel like the hardest decision we have to make is shifting our mindset to that I'm truly not stuck. There's resources out there. I can make this happen. People have done it before me. People are going to do it after me.
Welcome to another episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. I'm Tara Woodlee. I am the president and CEO of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. And we're glad to have you here on another episode with our podcast. This week's podcast, we're definitely going to focus on intimate partner abuse. And I have a really great guest, Kat Addams. She is an author of contemporary romantic comedies and women empowerment nonfiction titles. So she's had a passion for making readers laugh since she wrote her first over-the-top comic book at the age of 8, and earning like high marks and concerning looks from her grade school teachers. And she's a survivor of domestic violence. Kat channels her experience into advocating for victims through her writing and her podcast, You're Not Stuck. Her approach is blending blog humor with serious topics, and it helped her craft a genuine, relatable experience and connections with her audience. Outside of her work in education and entertainment, Kat loves to embark on outdoor adventures with her family. So welcome, Kat. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Well, you've got a background that is just phenomenal here. And so just to kind of, get a little background for our audience, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your experience as a survivor.
Yeah. So I was in a relationship for 15 years, married for a little over 10 of those to my abusive husband, ex-husband now. And like most everyone, it all starts out with the love bombing, and you think, oh, this person's great. And before you know it, you're in this fog, you don't know how to get out, and you're stuck. And I was living a life of just survival mode for a long time. I had my daughter. Things were just not getting better. I had tried to invest so much in the marriage. I tried to invest so much in him, supporting him, thinking, well, if I just do this, he'll change, or maybe he'll change if we do marriage counseling. And then I just realized that's not going to work. I have to save myself. No one's coming to save me. So that's when in 2019, I started writing, and I used to always have a passion for writing. I went to college. I got my English degree in creative writing. I loved writing. And, in my marriage, he kind of killed that for me. So I didn't get to do it as much anymore. And I just found that passion again, and I started writing, and that became not only my way out of that marriage, but also it was like a healing process for me. So I built this, brand on my books, and then it kind of spiraled from there to freelance. And then I filed for divorce right after I began writing, and right before, I think it was right after I launched my first book, just to try to get on my feet. And now here I am, and divorced, happily remarried. But it's been a wild journey, but worth it.
I think it's always good for people to see out there that you can leave this kind of experience and find a good, healthy relationship at the end of it, right? And so it's good for those out there who have survived the process, that are still kind of finding their healing and their way, to see us who have been able to do that and grow and have good relationships that they can expand upon. So
for sure.
Awesome. So let's just talk a little bit about your book. So you talk a lot about like personal energy and the dynamics of that with the domestic violence relationship. So, let's talk about that a little bit, about how it affects you when you finally make the decision to stay or to leave. So I know, like personally, I personally did have to make like that choice. It was time to go or to leave, and the ramifications of that. So tell me a little bit about how you approached it in your book.
So I feel like the hardest decision we have to make is shifting our mindset to that I'm truly not stuck. There's resources out there. I can make this happen. People have done it before me. People are going to do it after me. And it's a whole energy shift from what I have seen and in my personal experience as well, using our energy. And we have like limited energy being in an abusive relationship, because that's the whole point. Abusers wearing you down so you can't make these big plans to get out of the situation. But shifting that energy from trying to save your marriage by going to marriage counseling, or trying to please your husband, telling yourself something like, well, he gripes about I gained 10 pounds, so maybe I should just fix myself. But you're using that energy again to please him. And if you have that mindset shift where like, okay, this limited amount of energy I have, I'm going to shift it from trying to please him or trying to save this marriage, because let's face it, he's probably not going to change. It's not going to work. He's never going to be happy. You're always going to be blamed. To growing myself so I can get out of this situation. That's where things start to shift. And that's when you can start putting plans into actions. Because a lot of times the whole mental trauma healing and understanding what's happening happens after someone exits a relationship. But if we start learning how to empower ourselves before we leave, then maybe we can cut down on that statistic that everyone hears. It's like, a victim returns to her abuser 7 times. I believe that.
Right.
So maybe we can cut down on that if we're learning, before we leave, what may happen to cause us to return. If we empower ourselves with that information, if we spend the energy on growing that part of ourselves, then maybe we won't be tempted to go back. That's kind of how I have always approached that.
Yeah. So, what I hear you saying definitely is that you're not advocating that, we just be able to switch that shift, to that it's a process, right?
Yeah.
And I can relate to that, because for myself, it definitely was a 13-year process for me. And then the last final year, the process extended over a period of a year of, okay, what are my next steps? Okay, I get a job. That's the first step I'm going to do to empower myself. The second step I'm going to do to empower myself is start saving my own money. And the next step is going to be, finding my own, way, so that when I leave, when this is over, I'm doing XYZ. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It is a long process. It's a journey. But that first step is always just realizing, like, you might have had this dream that, you're going to have this perfect little family, and the man you met, is just this great, charismatic man. But it's really hard to face the reality and the truth when that's really not what it is. So accepting that that's not going to be your life. You will have to start over. And no one wants to start over, but you will have to start over, and just doing that mindset shift to stopping like being on a hamster wheel to try to get something it's not realistic. You're not going to get there with this abusive partner. It's a bunch of little steps into place to finally get to the other side of being in a toxic relationship.
Absolutely. So for you personally, what kind of steps did you follow through before that you found yourself that inspired you to write the book?
Yeah. So I was a stay-at-home mom for a little over 10 years. I was not in the workforce anymore. That was probably the biggest thing that held me back. Also I had a husband who was telling me, you can't survive without me, what are you going to do for money? And I believed it because I was a stay-at-home mom. I was like, who's going to hire me after 10 years? And, so I thought I had all this working against me. And I had this one moment, and my daughter was, I think she was 8 at the time. And I had, he had been horrible to me in front of her for years, but it started finally affecting her. And I started seeing it on the outside. Like, she would get so scared that she would just go run and hide when he started raising his voice. And that's when I was just like, I can't do it anymore. I have to get her out of this situation because I don't want her to think this is normal. And that was kind of my last straw. And that's when I went back to, okay, what do I have to do? And I needed money. Like a lot of people trapped in these situations, they need to be financially independent. So I did a lot of little things. Also, lawyers are expensive. So I definitely had a little bit of support there from my family. If you have a support system, that is awesome. But I did like, I would go to the grocery store and do the thing where it's like, hey, cash back, $20. And I had a stash. So anytime, that was kind of how I hid money I needed to go to safety. So I did have a little stash there for if I had to run hotel stays, you can't track my credit card because I'm paying in cash, lawyer stuff, things like that. So I kind of built up my own little safety net slowly. And then I started just forcing myself to sit down and write again because I knew that would be my ticket to financial independence. Publishing books, and not even like going through traditional publishing, all that. You can write a book and put it on Amazon like in no time and start learning the business and earning a little bit of income there. So that's kind of how I started.
Well, your story sounds very similar to mine because I had 10 years too. And it took 13 finally before I was going. But I can relate to what you're saying because I tell people all the time with my story, I had so ingrained in my head, even from childhood, that I was so worthless that I deserved the fighting, the arguing, everything that was going on, even the hitting. And he made me feel that way so constantly. Unfortunately for me, it took him cheating before I went, I'm worth better than this. I'm worth so much more. And also like listening to my two daughters, right? They had become 13 and 10 and telling me, why are we staying?
Yeah.
The thing as well. And that's a big eye opener for me. A big excuse was, how can I not deny my children their father? And so it's a huge shift in mindset as you go through, because what you intended with that person is so different than what you got.
Yeah.
And you're still trying to get back to where you thought you were in the beginning. It's just disastrous sometimes. And so I can relate with that. So you discussed a little bit about the emotional challenges and barriers, shifting that mindset from survival mode. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? How we can empower DV and our relationships, empower ourselves as the victims of it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, like I said, I feel like the first step is just accepting it and kind of severing that attachment you have to what you thought life would be like, or the attachment to what you thought your husband would be like or your partner would be like. And there's a lot of shame around that. And I've seen it, I've experienced it, because on the outside, a lot of people think, oh, well, everything's great. You might be the stay-at-home mom that brings the special cookies to PTA, and whatnot. And it's hard to think about giving that identity up, but that identity is not real, and you're not going to be happy unless you're authentic to yourself. So I always recommend starting there, just because it's the hardest part, severing that attachment to something that's not real, to a fairy tale, because that's just what it is a fairy tale. But then working on learned helplessness and limiting beliefs. Learned helplessness being like, your abusive spouse telling you you can't survive without me.
Oh, yeah.
What are you going to do for money? I'm going to take the kids. Like if you divorce me, you won't have the kids. You won't see the kids at all. Anything they can do to get you back under their control, anything they can tell you. So starting to kind of work on that and know ahead of time that, okay, well, narcissists, they kind of follow, or narcissists and abusers kind of follow a playbook. I don't know how they learn this stuff, but it's all the same playbook. So
Oh,
if you
yeah.
know ahead of time, that they're going to use these tricks, they're going to say this, they're going to say that, and work on learning that so you can arm yourself with the information and know ahead of time, like, that's not going to work on me. I already know that's not going to work on me. That's a lie. It's not going to work on me. And same with the limiting beliefs, because you just, they wear you down to where you don't have self-worth, you don't have self-confidence, you don't believe in yourself, and that can even come from a past, like you said, from childhood, because this is a cycle. A lot of us are coming from, these situations being normal, but realizing that they're not normal. And, this toxic behavior, it really does not have to be this way. Because there was a point where I just accepted it and I thought, this is just the cards I'm dealt in life. And I truly accepted it. And that was probably the lowest point in my life. And I get, kind of upset about it when I think about who I used to be and who I am now. And if I had just stayed there accepting that, like, I would never have gotten to experience what it feels like to be free of control, to be in a healthy, equal partnership, to do some of the things that I've found I love to do that I didn't even know back then, like traveling and being in nature. Like the old me would have never gone on a hike. I would have been like, nope, I'm not going outside. There's ticks, there's snakes.
Right.
But I never had those opportunities, because I was so controlled and kind of prevented from doing much of anything. And now it's like, I love being outside. I love being in nature. It's just those baby steps of figuring this stuff out for yourself while you're making a plan, but before you leave, instead of, you left and now you're super traumatized and you don't have this information and you still have very little self-confidence and self-worth. And that's when you're super vulnerable, and that's when they get you back. So if you know ahead of time, then maybe you'll have the strength to say no and not return, because, you might not get another chance if you do return. That's just the sad fact about it, is it's dangerous to return. And if you can make that step and you're already gone and you're already stable, or at least on the way to being stable, and you have this information, it's going to make you that much more confident to keep moving forward and not look back.
No, absolutely. And it's tough sometimes because you get so locked into, sometimes I like to use analogies, and a lot of over the years, survivors I've talked to, is we get so locked into, we know it's like a playbook that they use. It's a plan. And if you think about it in terms of like football, I love football. That it's always them on the offensive and you're always on the defensive. And you never really learn and figure out how to establish how you can grow and go on the offensive in a way that is healthy and get you to where you're secure and where you need to be. And I think that's similar to what you're saying, is that we need to grow on how to work that offensive for us, how we can, have a game plan ourselves as to how we get out, how we grow, how we talk to ourselves. And instead of just always running in that defensive, in that fight or flight mode, or whatever we're doing in those moments, that we're locked into the cycle. And it really is hard to break from. It really is.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is important information for people to kind of hear, that you can, if you can start to work on your mindset as you're leaving, to where you kind of shift how your thinking is, that you deserve this, that you are worthy, that you can do these things, you can get a job, you can recover, and your kids can recover. You can
Yeah.
find some
Yeah.
freedom. Yeah, I'm with you on that. The things I do now that I never thought I would ever accomplish in that marriage. Wow.
Yeah.
So I
Mm.
never, I got a bucket list. I'm in my 50s now, and I'm like, I'm young enough. Let's do it now before I'm too old. And that was not the Tara before. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
the Tara
exactly.
before wouldn't have gotten in a helicopter and flown over Las Vegas,
Yeah.
yeah. So I like the new me. I like the new her,
Yeah.
so that's definitely, something that's worth doing. So Kat, can you share some success stories, examples of individuals that have like successfully redirected their energy from abuse?
Yeah. So I am a huge fan of Reddit. I am on Reddit all the time. They
Yeah.
have amazing subreddits that I'm going to recommend. And the first one is called Because Now I Can. And so
Mm,
I don't know if you can put this in the show notes, but it's like
yes.
/ because _ now _ I _ can. And it is stories, exactly what we were just talking about. Like people post on there. I think I saw one the other day that was, I'm turning 40 at the beach. I'm sipping champagne. I would have never been able to do this back in my toxic relationship. I'm doing this because now I can. And
Right.
so it's all these amazing stories about survivors that have overcome. And they have, stories, some stuff, trigger warnings, definitely. They've got stuff in there that is disturbing, but that specific subreddit is mostly like, hey, look, I can do it. I'm doing it now. This, don't believe the lies and that you cannot do this and you have to live in this horrible controlling situation your whole life because now I can. And they're celebrating themselves. So that's definitely like my favorite subreddit right now. But you can also go to Abuse Interrupted subreddit. There's Abuse Survivor subreddit. There's a domestic violence subreddit. And there's all going to be stories in there of survivors and exactly what they did and the steps they took. There'll also be lots of questions, especially for like the domestic violence subreddit. People ask things like, is this abuse, stuff like that. But in there, you can find a lot of survivor stories. But that's definitely like my go-to when I need an extra, like, something to tell me this can be done, or I need another idea. What's other people doing? What are people doing who have been a stay-at-home mom? You can almost always find that stuff in those subreddits, and it's real people. It's not like you're reading an article and I don't know, Times Roman. I don't know, and you're so far removed. This is people who are posting this and commenting on it and saying, yeah, I did this too, or maybe I did this different. It's a plethora of information. So that's where I go to get like the survivor stories and, the ideas and thoughts on those extra steps that we might not know about that help someone. Could help us too. And things like that to help people continue on their journey.
No, social media is so great in that way. I know here at Break the Silence, what we've been able to do through social media, that's how we started. And now we're a national organization, helping to raise those voices. So I don't, I haven't been that much on Reddit, so I'm gonna have to check that out. But just so
Yeah.
those who are watching know, I know Break the Silence, we do submit, you can have an area to submit your survivor stories onto our website. We do that. I do know we have a Quora as well. So we have a
Okay.
fabulous person in there answering the questions about DV and Quora and stuff. But it's interesting that Reddit has become such a big platform for that. Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So is that
It's
is it a way for people to be more anonymous and stuff and do that in there? Is that why
You
people love the
can.
Reddit so much?
Yeah, you can post anonymously. And it's kind of like a support group.
Oh,
People,
okay.
I've tips on Reddit, people to lean on, people who are going through the same things as you. Like when I was going through my divorce, there's a divorce subreddit, so like what to expect. People are, it's shared, I guess you could say shared misery, but also shared celebration, shared happiness, shared stories, and it's just like a virtual support group, basically.
Awesome. So, are there some other things you'd love to tell us about your book that that might interest readers, so that we definitely want to encourage them to go purchase your book and read it. So
Yeah,
is there any more details you want to give about that?
the book is about basically what we've been talking about, changing yourself instead of focusing your energy on changing your partner. And it starts with breaking down the things you've been taught about your self-worth and kind of remembering who you were before or who you always wanted to be, and getting back to when you're in an abusive relationship, you feel like you're just kind of a shell of a person. They erase you, like you don't exist anymore. You're just on survival mode. It's the fight or flight thing. You're walking on eggshells. And the book takes you through to kind of that person back, and it has practical stuff in there, like the go bag, things like that you hear about, packing your go bag for emergencies, but also things that I've learned just over time in the many self-help books I've read, because I highly, if you can't afford therapy, start checking out a lot of self-help, self-growth books. Regaining your worth and your value through different exercises, being in nature, one, like taking that time for yourself, lots of self-care, big on self-care. And yeah, it's just, I always say it starts with self, just that shifting your energy back to yourself instead of to your partner, or trying to save something that unfortunately we have to accept is not going to be the reality. We're not going to have these fairy tale lives when you're stuck in these situations. They almost always never end on a good note. So if we can just accept that and start working on ourselves instead, then maybe we can get to the other side and hopefully not return back to that situation.
No, absolutely. And I just encourage anybody out there who is still in those kinds of relationships, just get out, get a plan, get to safety. If it takes time, you're the best judge of what kind of situation you are in. If it's immediate danger, get help ASAP. And if you can make that plan and get out safely, and then make the plan, get out safely. There's help out there. So is there anything else you'd like to just focus on, Kat, with the what time we have left here?
I don't think so. I just think I think I've said everything. Just main goal is, just going back to trying to fix that stinking statistic of the returning 7 times, because you hear that statistic and a lot of times I think a victim will get it in their head like, okay, well, this is normal. I've left 2 times. I've got, 4 more times of this, and they kind of use it as a crutch. And if we can just arm them with the information, the knowledge and the empowerment before they hear that 7 times, then maybe we could cut back on that. It's just, I can understand both ways where you hear that statistic and it's like, okay, well then I'm normal. So that makes you feel better. But then again, it can also be damaging because it can also be that crutch. So that's kind of like my all encompassing mission. And what I try to do is to fix that, to lower it. It'd be great if we could just, as high hopes, eliminate it to where you leave and you're just done. But I understand, been there, done that, the reality of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it happens. We get suckered back into believing they're going to change, so you go back. But after a while, it's really, you start to question after you got through that phase. I feel like it's a stage with that 7 times. And yeah, if we can cut the stages to where people are more aware, so it shortens that time, I'm all for that. That's great. But I think it does. It goes through stages of like, you just feel like, you believe they're going to fix it. And then you move beyond that. Now it's, well, he's not going to fix it. We're not going to fix this together. Can I really even do this on my own? I'm out here and I'm scared, and so it's more of the stage of going into your own self-worth and being confident in that time period. And then I think gaining that, what you're talking about, helping to gain that self-worth, I think that's part of why that statistic goes out so long. And if there's information out there to help empower people so we can shorten that statistic, that would just be so fabulous. I'm with you on that, because the 7 times floored me the first time I heard that. I thought, are you serious? Now I can understand from my
Yeah.
generation, because like my generation was the year I happened to get my divorce was when they passed the laws that somebody was going to go to jail, right, for domestic violence. Before
Oh,
that, the police would show up and go, well, it takes two of you to fight, and you just need to take a
yeah.
walk. And so I understood more of why that would be so for my generation 7 times, because all of society, your pastor and everybody went back. But to hear that statistic just years, like it was a little over 10 years ago, after my daughter had been murdered in her domestic violence incident, um, floored me that after all those years of the laws to where somebody's going to go to jail and all of that, that it still was like 7 times before someone gets out, and they go back seven
Yeah.
times. Yeah, it sometimes just feels like, as much as we work to create the change is just not happening quite fast enough, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how can we as survivors help springboard that for the generation who's experiencing it now? I think you have a
Yeah.
really great heart for that. So,
Thank you.
uh, oh no,
Yeah,
thank
you're
you.
right. When you talk about like that statistics, and we're talking about like social media, I don't know if y'all are on TikTok, but I'm
Yeah,
actually super proud of generation because they're passing around a lot of this information on like
yeah,
red flags, abuse, narcissist, and these are like younger people and
uh-huh.
they're raising awareness about it. And it's just like, I hope we can continue on this journey and maybe see progress a little bit quicker with people passing that information along now in social media and being aware. Because when I was younger, I didn't even know what an abusive relationship was. Like, I remember when I was finally realized what was happening, I was Googling, like, why is my boyfriend so mean? And learning, oh my
Yes.
gosh, I'm actually being abused. And
Uh-huh.
now that information is getting into the younger generation's hands quicker with social media. So I will say that's a great part of social media. And I hope in the future we can see those changes a little bit quicker.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree, because that's a part of what, our generation definitely, it was abuse wasn't the word. It was, why was he so mean? Exactly. I was going to
Yeah.
say that. I was thinking that while you were, yeah, because that's what we were all, you just got a mean husband. He's just mean, and
Yeah.
no, that was more than mean.
Yeah.
So
Uh, yeah.
absolutely.
I actually did a podcast series called Is My Partner Abusive, or is he, it was a bad word, a jerk? We'll just say a jerk. And it laid
Yes.
out like, no, this is emotional, physical, psychological. This is abuse. This is the differences. Um, Still a lot of people I see who are just like, oh, is he just being mean? And I'm like, no, you're being abused. It's,
Right.
it's not, gray, it's black and white.
Right. And I think that there's so many out there, I know, speaking as much as I have across the country, and I'm sure you experience this as well. You go and you speak before groups and stuff, or you're talking to people, and all of a sudden you see the light bulb come on, and a woman or even a young man, I've had that experience as well. The light bulb comes on, and they go, oh, I didn't think I was abused in that relationship, but I was. I was in a
Yeah.
relationship, and they didn't even really realize it. So I think social media is the greatest platform to help raise that awareness, especially with our younger generations. So
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you,
Mhm.
Kat. And so we're going to just conclude this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. Absolutely look into the description, check out Kat's book, and contact us if you want to submit your stories. Look at our website. It's www.breakthesilencedv.org. You can submit your story there, and we'll be glad to have that as part of our group, our sisterhood. We are also currently have a sister retreat coming up in April. Check out that on the website if you'd like to participate and become a part of the sisterhood. We would love to have you attend the retreat. And thank you again.